between position like that. Now.
In today's Nonsense Wars production, we build 4 of the models in the 8891 Technic Ideas book from 1991. As far as we know, LEGO no longer makes ideas books. They have gone away with things like the instruction list alt models on old box art. We actually got our copy of 8891 with our 8094 control center, so of course we built the 2 control center alt models along with 2 others that we found interesting. The 2 alt models, and I call them alt models because they require the control center brick and because the 8094 can build them without additional parts, differ in implementation but kind of have the same idea. The flight simulator and the mechanical bull are both programmable mechanisms that don't really interact with their environment, similar to the drummer in Record and Play. The simulator uses pairs of toothed toggle joints to make effectively a number 2 connector, as neither the number 2 connector nor the standard axle joiner existed at the time. It also uses universal joints as hinges, which I have done before in the QJ chassis. The drivetrains control the pitch and the roll of the quote-unquote aircraft, and each has 2 belt stages and 1 gear stage, with a net reduction of about 1 to 100. In my opinion, this is far too little reduction given the application and motor. The lack of reduction and the slop in the belt stages conspire to make the simulator very hard to control. The movements are both jerky and unresponsive, depending on whether the rubber bands want to grip. The hardware can easily get out of sync with the software, especially when recording smaller, more precise movements. Perhaps the designers only intended for the plane to toggle between the extreme positions, but that doesn't seem quite right either. If the reduction were doubled and the slop halved, the simulator could have been a nice piece, but as shown, it was definitely the worst of the models we built. On the other hand, the bull impressed us despite its small size and seemingly simple construction. It uses old bevel gears to shim crown gears to the correct spacing for mounting underneath a Technic plate. I don't believe I've seen LEGO do this in any production set, but again, I've definitely done it in some of my own builds. It also has some places where drive axles double as structural connections, but this is not terribly unusual for this era. One motor bucks and the other motor spins the bull. Both motions can run in both directions indefinitely. Due to the way that the drivetrains interleave, only spinning the bull will cause it to buck slowly. Similarly, with both motions running, the bull will buck faster in one spin direction than the other. This model works well because the motion is fluid and believable, and the programming needn't be precise. It doesn't really matter if the bull stops or starts in the same location and position. It kind of has a gamification element too. You can try to buck a Technic figure rider, though in practice it depends more on how well you secure it. The Technic figure hand will grip an axle fairly well in some orientations and almost not at all in others. Still, I don't think this detracts from the build overall. The bull was definitely one of the better models, and the static pictures in the book don't really do it justice. Now, the aerial tram is an entirely different beast, and probably the most interesting model in 8891. Not only is the prototype something that has never been done in a production set, it has a mechanism that, as far as I know, has never been done either. Reliable mechanical reversers are generally considered finicky and not easy to make, so it's surprising to see one show up in official LEGO source material, even if it's in an ideas book. This is actually the model that inspired me to make my GBC mechanical reverser mover, and as such it works mostly the same way. At each end of the tram's travel, bumpers riding on the cable trigger a sliding axle transmission that shifts between a forward and reverse gear. The transmission drives a capstan with a single winding, and this propels the vehicle. Most impressively, the tram actually worked well and did not require much tuning. The long lever arm attached to the bumpers effectively gears up the bumping action, encouraging a full shift and discouraging the transmission from dead centering. I didn't grasp the significance of this detail until I tried to build the mover. I think the rubber bands help less with preventing dead centering and more with simply keeping the transmission in gear after a shift. Finally, we get to the power loader, a walking machine with two pneumatic arms, perhaps a tribute to the movie Aliens. It has an odd combination of motorized and manual functions. Rarely in production pneumatic sets does a motor drive the vehicle rather than, say, a pump. A simple crank system drives the legs, the arms consist of 4-bar linkages, and the hands have no articulation or grip. The power loader had the most fiddly build out of the 4 models we tried. You need to line up the gears for the legs such that all the cranks have the same phase, but the instructions don't specifically call it out. We also had a less than good time tracking and routing the massive pneumatic tubing, and in many places the model uses larger parts or more parts in place of a more modern part not available at the time. We also made a bunch of part substitutions, mostly identical parts of different color, but we also replaced some mechanical components with the aforementioned sturdier modern equivalents. Functionally, the power loader is probably just too big for its own good. It has to walk very slowly, and even then seems to struggle to do so. The relatively flimsy legs often make working the pump awkward, and the arms are mounted much too high to pick up anything other than a deliberately shaped and placed load. Since the claws have no grip, it can't pick up anything without a lip, and on top of it all, picking up a moderately heavy load will cause it to fall over when walking. Still, I do think all the functions work better than those of the simulator, so it's not the worst model of the lot. Finally, even though I talk about quote-unquote best or worse, all 4 machines were still quite unique relative to production sets, though to be fair, we selected them after passing over a lot of the more generic models that make up the bulk of the book. Perhaps there will be a part 2, or perhaps not. On that note, this is the end of the video, so have a nice day.